Number 5078. And the baker. This signifies those things in the body which are subject to the will part, as is evident from the signification of a baker, namely, that external bodily sensuous part which is subordinate or subject to the will part of the internal man. A baker has this signification because everything that serves for food or that is eaten, such as bread, food in general, and everything made by the baker is predicated of good, and therefore bears relation to the will part. For all good is of this part, just as all truth is of the intellectual part. That bread is the celestial or good may be seen above. The reason why here and in the following verses of this chapter the external sensuous things of both kinds are treated of in the internal sense is that in the previous chapter the subject treated of was the Lord, and how he glorified or made divine the interior things of his natural. Here therefore the subject treated of is the Lord, and how he glorified or made divine the exterior things of his natural. The exterior things of the natural are what are properly called the bodily things, or the sensuous things of both kinds together with their recipient organs, for these together constitute what is called the body. The Lord made the very bodily part in himself divine, both its sensuous things and their recipient organs, and he therefore rose again from the sepulchre with his body, and likewise after his resurrection said to the disciples, Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Feel me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones, as ye see me have. Most members of the Church at this day believe that every one is to rise again at the last day with his body. And this opinion is so universal that almost every one holds it as a matter of doctrine. But this opinion has prevailed because the natural man supposes that it is the body alone that lives. And therefore, unless he believed that the body would receive life again, he would deny the resurrection altogether. But the truth of the matter is this. Man rises again immediately after death, and he then appears to himself in a body just as in this world, with a similar face, members, arms, hands, feet, breast, abdomen, and loins. So that when he sees and touches himself, he says that he is a man as in the world. Nevertheless, what he sees and touches is not his external which he carried about in the world, but it is the internal which constitutes that very human which is alive, and which had about it in general and in particular an external, by which it could be in the world, and conveniently act and perform its functions there. The earthly bodily part is no longer of any use to him, he being in another world where are other functions, powers, and abilities, to which the nature of his body there is adapted. This body he sees with his eyes, not those which he had in the world, but those which he has there, which are the eyes of his internal man, and by which through the eyes of the body he had before seen worldly and earthly things. This body he also feels with the touch, not with the hands or the sense of touch which he enjoyed in the world, but with the hands and the sense of touch which he enjoys there, which is that from which his sense of touch in the world proceeded. Moreover, every sense is more exquisite and more perfect there, because it is the sense of the internal man freed from the external. The internal is in a more perfect state, for it gives the power of sensation to the external. But when it acts into the external, as is the case in the world, sensation is dulled and obscured. Moreover, the internal is sensible of the internal, and the external of the external. This is why men after death see one another, and are in company together according to their interiors. In order that I might be sure of this matter, I have been allowed to touch the spirits themselves, and often to discuss the matter with them. Men after death, who are then called spirits, and if they have lived in good, angels, marvel exceedingly that a member of the church should believe that he will not see eternal life until the last day when the world shall perish, and that he will then be clothed again with the cast-off dust, when he knows that he rises again after death. For who does not say, when a man dies, that his soul or spirit is in heaven or else in hell? And who does not say of his children who have died that they are in heaven? And who does not comfort a sick person, or one condemned to death, with the assurance that he will shortly enter the other life? And he who is in the agony of death and is prepared, believes this. Nay, in this belief many also claim for themselves the power of delivering others from places of damnation, of admitting them into heaven, and of saying masses on their behalf. Who does not know what the Lord said to the thief, "Today shalt thou be with me in paradise"? And what he said of the rich man and Lazarus, that the former was carried into hell, but the latter borne by the angels into heaven? And who does not know what the Lord taught concerning the resurrection, that he is not the God of the dead, but of the living? A man knows these things, and thus thinks and speaks when he does so from his spirit. But when he thinks and speaks from doctrine, he says, on the contrary, that he will not rise again till the last day. Yet the last day for everyone is when he dies, and then also is his judgment, as indeed many admit. What is meant by being encompassed with skin and from the flesh seeing God may be seen above. These things are said in order to show that no man rises again in the body with which he was clothed in the world, but that the Lord alone so rose, and this because he glorified his body or made it divine, while he was in the world. Number 5079. Against their lord, the king of Egypt. This signifies that they, namely the external sensuous things, or those of the body, signified by the butler and the baker, were contrary to the new state of the natural man, as is evident from the signification of the king of Egypt, namely external knowledge in general. For the same is signified by the king of Egypt as by Egypt, the king being the head of the nation. And it is the same in other passages also where mention is made of the king of any nation. As external knowledge in general is signified by the king of Egypt, the natural man is also signified thereby, because all external knowledge is the truth of the natural man. The good itself of the natural man is signified by Lord. A new state of the natural man is here signified, because in the preceding chapter was described the renovation of the interior things of the natural, and in the supreme sense which relates to the Lord, that they were glorified. But the subject here treated of is the exterior things of the natural, which were to be reduced to harmony or correspondence with the interior things. Those renewed interior things of the natural, or what is the same thing, the new state of the natural man, is signified by their lord the king of Egypt. And the exterior things which were not reduced to order and hence were contrary to order are signified by the butler and the baker. There are interior and there are exterior things of the natural, the interior of the natural being external knowledges and the affections thereof, while the exterior are the sensuous things of both kinds, spoken of above. When a man dies, he leaves behind him these exterior things of the natural, but carries with him into the other life the interior things of the natural, where they serve as a plane for things spiritual and celestial. For when a man dies, he loses nothing except his bones and flesh. He takes with him the memory of all that he has done, spoken, or thought, and he possesses all his natural affections and desires, thus all the interior things of the natural. Of the exterior he has no need, For he does not see, hear, smell, taste, nor touch the things of this world, but those of the other life, which indeed look for the most part like those of this world, but they are unlike them, for they have in them what is living, which the things proper to the natural world have not. For each and all of the things in the other life exist and subsist from the Son there, which is the Lord, whence they have in them what is living. Whereas each and all of the things in the natural world exist and subsist from its Son, which is elementary fire, and hence have in them nothing living. What appears living in them originates solely from the spiritual world, that is, from the Lord through the spiritual world. Number 5080. And Pharaoh was wroth. This signifies that the new natural man averted itself, as is evident from the representation of Pharaoh, or the king of Egypt, namely the new natural man, or the new state of the natural man, and from the signification of being wroth or angry, namely averting oneself. Here therefore it signifies that the interior natural, which was made new, averted itself from the exterior natural, or bodily sensuous part, because this did not correspond with it. Number 5081. Against his 2 officers. This signifies that it averted itself from the sensuous things of the body of both kinds, as is evident from the signification of officers, who here are the butler and the baker, namely the sensuous things of both kinds. The sensuous things of the body, namely the sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, are as it were ministers of the court relatively to the interior man, who is their lord, the king. For they minister to him so that he may learn by experience of the visible world and human society, and may thus acquire intelligence and wisdom. For man is not born with any knowledge, still less with any intelligence or wisdom, but only with the capability of receiving and assimilating them. This is effected in 2 ways, by an internal way and by an external way. By the internal way flows in what is divine, by the external way flows in what is of the world. These meet within the man, and then so far as he allows himself to be enlightened by the divine, he acquires wisdom. The things which flow in by the external way flow in through the senses of the body, yet they never flow in of themselves, but are called forth by the internal man to serve as a plane for the celestial and spiritual things, which flow in by the internal way from the divine. This shows that the sensuous things of the body are like the ministers of a court. In general, all exterior things are ministers relatively to interior things. The whole natural man is nothing else relatively to the spiritual man. In the original language, the term here used means a minister, officer, chamberlain, or eunuch. In the internal sense, it signifies, as here, the natural man as to good and truth, but specifically the natural man as to good. As in Isaiah, "Let not the son of the stranger that cleaveth to Jehovah speak, saying, Jehovah will surely separate me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, Behold, I am dry wood. For thus hath said Jehovah to the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose that wherewith I am delighted, and are holding my covenant. I will give them in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than sons and daughters, and I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off." Here a eunuch denotes the natural man as to good, and the son of the stranger the natural man as to truth. For the church of the Lord is external and internal, and they of the external church are natural, while they of the internal church are spiritual. They who are natural and yet in good are eunuchs, and they in truth are the sons of the stranger. And as the truly spiritual or internal are to be found only within the church, The sons of the stranger signify those who are outside the church or the Gentiles, and yet are in truth according to their religion. And eunuchs signify those who are in good. Number 5082. With the chief of the butlers and with the chief of the bakers. This signifies in general from the sensuous things subordinate to the intellectual part and to the will part, as is evident from the signification of a butler, namely the sensuous subordinate and subject to the intellectual part, and from the signification of a baker, namely the sensuous subordinate and subject to the will part, and from the signification of a chief, namely what is primary, here in general or in common, for what is primary is also common, because it rules in the rest. For particulars bear relation to primaries as to generals, in order that they may make a one, and that no contradiction may appear. Number 5083. And he put them into the custody. This signifies rejection, as is evident from the signification of putting into custody, namely rejection. For he who is put into custody is rejected. Number 5084. Of the house of the chief of the guards. This signifies by those things which are of primary importance for interpretation, as is evident from the signification of the chief of the guards as being what is of primary importance for interpretation. Here, therefore, the meaning is that the sensuous things of both kinds were rejected by the things of primary importance for interpretation, namely those which relate to the internal sense of the word. And these sensuous things are said to be rejected when no faith is placed in them. For sensuous things, and those which by their means enter immediately into the thought, are fallacious, and all the fallacies which prevail in man are from this source. It is owing to these fallacies that few believe the truths of faith, and that the natural man is opposed to the spiritual, that is, the external man to the internal. And therefore, if the natural or external man begins to rule over the spiritual or internal man, the things of faith are no longer believed, for fallacies overshadow and cupidities suffocate them. As few know what the fallacies of the senses are, and few believe that they cast so great a shadow on rational things, and most of all on the spiritual things of faith, even to their extinction, especially when the man is at the same time in the delight of the cupidities from the love of self and the love of the world. The subject may be illustrated by examples, exposing first the fallacies of the senses which are merely natural, or due to natural things, and then the fallacies of the senses in spiritual things. It is a fallacy of merely natural sense, or one due to nature, to believe that the sun revolves once each day around this earth, and also the sky with all the stars. And although it is pointed out as incredible, because impossible, that so great an ocean of fire as the sun, and not only the sun but also innumerable stars, should revolve around the earth once a day without any relative change of place, and although it is added that the planets show that the earth performs a daily and annual motion by rotation and revolution, the planets also being earths, some of them with moons revolving around them and making, as is known by observation, daily and annual motions like our earth. Nevertheless, with very many persons the fallacy of sense prevails, that these things are as they seem to the eye. It is a fallacy of merely natural sense, or one due to nature, that there is only a single atmosphere, and that this is more and more rarefied until where it ceases there is a vacuum. The external sense of man so conceives the matter when it alone is consulted. It is a merely natural fallacy that from the first creation seeds have been endowed with the property of growing up into trees and flowers, and of reproducing themselves. and that this is the source of the existence and subsistence of all things. And if it is objected that nothing can subsist unless it perpetually comes into existence, according to the law that subsistence is perpetual existence, and also that everything unconnected with something prior to itself is annihilated, still the senses of the body and thought therefrom cannot apprehend this, nor that each and all things subsist in the same way as they came into existence, by influx from the spiritual world, that is to say, through the spiritual world from the divine. Hence it is a merely natural fallacy to suppose that there are simple substances, namely, monads and atoms. For whatever is within the range of the external senses, the natural man believes to be a simple substance, and whatever is beyond their range he regards as nothing. It is a merely natural fallacy that all things are of nature and from nature, including something of a pure or interior nature which escapes observation. But if anyone says that within or above nature is the spiritual and celestial, this is denied, in the belief that whatever is not natural is nothing. It is a fallacy of the senses that only the body lives, and that life perishes when the body dies. The sensuous faculty does not understand that the internal man is in every particular of the external man, and that the internal man is within nature and in the spiritual world. Hence it does not believe, because it does not understand, that the internal man will live after death, unless it is again clothed with the body. Hence it is a fallacy of the senses that man cannot live after death any more than the beasts, because these also have a life similar in many respects to that of man, man being only a more perfect animal. The sensuous faculty, that is, the man who thinks and draws conclusions therefrom, does not understand that man is above the beasts and has a higher life, since he can think not only about the causes of things, but also about the divine, and can by faith and love be conjoined with the divine, and also receive influx therefrom, and make it his own. Thus that, as there is reciprocity in man, there is also reception, as is by no means the case with beasts. It is a consequent fallacy that the very living part of man, which is called the soul, is merely something ethereal or flamy, which is dissipated when the man dies, and that it resides in the heart, or in the brain, or in some part of it, and thence rules the body like a machine. That the internal man is in every part of the external man, and that the eye does not see from itself, nor the ear hear from itself, but from the internal man, the sensuous man cannot conceive. It is a fallacy of the senses that light and also heat come from no other source than the sun or elementary fire. That there is a light containing intelligence and heat containing heavenly love, and that all the angels are in this light and heat, the sensuous cannot conceive. It is a fallacy of the senses when a man believes that he lives of himself, or that life has been imparted to him, for so it appears to the sensuous mind. That it is the divine alone which has life of itself, and thus that there is only one life, and that the lives in the world are only recipient forms, the sensuous mind cannot at all conceive. The sensuous man believes from fallacy that adulteries are allowable, for from the sensuous he concludes that marriages are instituted merely in behalf of order, for the sake of the education of the offspring, and that so long as this order is not destroyed, it is immaterial from whom the offspring comes, and also that marriage differs from lasciviousness merely in its being allowed. Thus also, that it would not be contrary to order to marry more than one wife, if it were not forbidden by the Christian world from Holy Scripture. If told that there is a correspondence between the heavenly marriage and marriages on earth, and that no one can participate in marriage unless he be in spiritual truth and good. Also that genuine marriage cannot possibly exist between a husband and several wives, and hence that marriages are in themselves holy. The sensuous man rejects these things as of no account. It is a fallacy of the senses that the Lord's kingdom or heaven resembles an earthly kingdom, in that the joy and happiness there consist in one being greater than another, and hence having more glory than another. For the sensuous faculty cannot conceive what is meant by the least being greatest, or the last first. If such men are told that joy in heaven, or for the angels, consists in ministering to the welfare of others, without any thought of merit or reward, this strikes them as being sad. It is a fallacy of the senses that good works are meritorious, and that to benefit anyone for the sake of self is a good work. It is also a fallacy of the senses that man is saved by faith alone, and that faith can exist in one who has no charity, and also that it is the faith and not the life that remains after death, and so on in very many other instances. When therefore what is sensuous rules in man, the rational faculty enlightened from the divine is in thick darkness and sees nothing. And it is then believed that every conclusion is rational which is based upon the senses. Number 5085. Into the prison house. This signifies among falsities, as is evident from the signification of a prison house, namely the vast station of falsity, and hence falsity. Number 5086. The place where Joseph was bound. This signifies the state of the celestial of the natural now as to these things, as is evident from the signification of place, namely state. From the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual from the rational. Here the celestial of the natural, because now in the natural from which come temptations. And from the signification of being bound, namely a state of temptations. In the foregoing chapter, the subject is the state of temptations of the celestial of the spiritual in the natural, as to those things which were of the interior natural, and here as to those things which are of the exterior natural. Number 5087. And the chief of the guard set Joseph over them. This signifies that the celestial of the natural taught them from things of primary importance for interpretation, as is evident from the signification of the chief of the guards, namely things of primary importance for interpretation. From the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the natural, and from the signification of to be set over, as here being to teach, for he who for the purpose of examination or amendment is set over the things which are being rejected, performs the office of a teacher. Number 5088. And he ministered to them. This signifies that he instructed them, as is evident from the signification of ministering, namely instructing. That ministering does not here mean ministering as a servant, is evident from the fact that Joseph was set over them, and therefore to minister here denotes to provide what would be of benefit to them. And because the subject here is the new natural or external sensuous, to be set over means to teach, and to minister means to instruct. To be set over is predicated of the good which is of life, and to minister of the truth which is of doctrine. Number 5089. And they were for days in custody. This signifies that they were long in a state of rejection, as is evident from the signification of days, namely states. Here, therefore, 4 days means that they were long in the state of rejection which is signified by custody. The particulars contained in the internal sense cannot be here set forth more fully, because they are such that no idea can be formed of them from the things of this world, as for instance of the celestial spiritual man, and of its state in the natural, when the interior natural is being made new, and afterwards when it has been made new and the exterior natural is rejected. But of these and similar things an idea may be formed from the things in heaven, which idea is such that it does not enter into any idea formed from the things in this world, except in those who while in thought can be withdrawn from sensuous things. Unless man's thought can be elevated above sensuous things, so that these are seen below him, he cannot understand any interior thing in the Word, still less the things of heaven separated from those of the world. For sensuous things absorb and suffocate them. For this reason, those who are sensuous and are devoted to learning rarely understand the things of heaven, for they have immersed their thoughts in mundane things, that is, in phraseology and distinctions drawn therefrom, thus in sensuous things, out of which they can no longer be elevated and thus sustained at a higher point of view. Thus their thought can no longer be freely extended over the whole field of the memory, so as to select what agrees, reject what disagrees, and apply what is pertinent. For, as already said, their thought is confined to and immersed in learned terms, and thus in sensuous things, so that it cannot look around. This is why the learned believe less than the simple, and are even less wise in heavenly things. For the simple can look at a thing apart from learned phraseology, thus apart from sensuous things, whereas the learned cannot do so, but consider everything in learned terms, their mind being confined to these terms, and thus bound as in jail or in prison. Number 5090, verses 5 to 8. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each his dream in one night, each according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were bound in the prison house. And Joseph came unto them in the morning, and saw them, and behold, they were troubled. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the custody of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore are your faces evil today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it me, I pray. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, signifies foresight concerning them. Each his dream in one night, signifies concerning the event which to them was in obscurity. Each according to the interpretation of his dream, signifies which they had in themselves. The butler and the baker signifies concerning the sensuous things of both kinds. Of the king of Egypt, signifies which were subordinate to the interior natural. Who were bound in the prison house, signifies which were among falsities. And Joseph came unto them in the morning, signifies revealed and clear to the celestial of the natural. And saw them, signifies perception. And behold, they were troubled, signifies that they were in a sad state. And he asked Pharaoh's officers, signifies the sensuous things in question, that were with him in the custody of his lord's house, signifies which were rejected. Saying, Wherefore are your faces evil today? Signifies from what affection was this sadness? And they said unto him, signifies perception concerning these things. We have dreamed a dream, signifies prediction. And there is no interpreter of it, signifies that no one knows what is in them. And Joseph said unto them, signifies the celestial of the natural. Do not interpretations belong to God? signifies that the divine is in these things. Tell it me, I pray, signifies that it should be known. Number 5091. And they dreamed a dream, both of them. This signifies foresight concerning them, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely foresight. Both of them denotes the sensuous things of both kinds, signified by the butler and the baker. That the dreams were about these things is plain from the following verses. A dream in the supreme sense denotes foresight, because dreams which flow immediately through heaven from the Lord foretell things to come. Such were the dreams of Joseph, the dreams of the butler and the baker, the dream of Pharaoh, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and prophetic dreams in general. The things to come foretold by such dreams are solely from the Lord's divine foresight. Hence also it may be known that all things in general and particular are foreseen. Number 5092. Each his dream in one night. This signifies concerning the event which to them was in obscurity, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely foresight, and hence prediction. And because it signifies prediction, it also signifies the event, for prediction is concerning the event. And from the signification of night, namely obscurity. Night in the spiritual sense signifies a state of shade brought on by falsity from evil, thus also obscurity, that is, of the mind. The obscurity of night in the world is natural obscurity, but the obscurity of night in the other life is spiritual obscurity. The former arises from the absence of the sun of this world and the deprivation of light therefrom, but the latter from the absence of the Son of heaven, which is the Lord, and the deprivation of light, that is, of intelligence therefrom. This deprivation does not arise from the sun of heaven's setting like the sun of the world, but from a man or spirit being in falsity from evil, and thus receding, and bringing obscurity upon himself. The mere idea of night and its obscurity in both senses shows how the spiritual sense of these is related to the natural sense. Moreover, spiritual obscurity is threefold. One kind being from the falsity of evil, the second from ignorance of truth, and the third is that of exterior things relatively to interior things, thus of the sensuous things of the external man relatively to the rational things of the internal man. All these kinds of obscurity, however, arise from the fact that the light of heaven, or intelligence and wisdom from the Lord, is not received. For this light is continually flowing in, but it is rejected, extinguished, or perverted by the falsity of evil, is but little received by ignorance of truth, and is toned down by generalization by the sensuous things of the external man. Number 5093. Each according to the interpretation of his dream. This signifies which they had in themselves, namely the event, as is evident from the signification of the interpretation of a dream, namely the unfolding of it, and hence the knowledge of the event, thus the event in themselves. That a dream denotes the event may be seen just above. Number 5094. The butler and the baker. This signifies concerning the sensuous things of both kinds, as is evident from the signification of a butler, namely the sensuous subordinate to the intellectual part, and from the signification of a baker, namely the sensuous subordinate to the will part. That these were rejected by the interior natural has been said above. Be it known, however, that it was not the sensuous things themselves, namely those of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, that were rejected, for from these the body lives, but it was the views or thoughts, and also the affections and desires from them. Objects from the world enter the external or natural memory of man through the senses on the one hand, and through rational considerations on the other. These objects are separated in this memory. Those which have entered through rational considerations take a more interior place, but those which have entered through the senses have a more exterior place. Hence, as before said, the natural becomes twofold, interior and exterior. The interior natural is represented by Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, but the exterior natural by the butler and the baker. The difference may be seen from their respective views of things or thoughts and the conclusions thence derived. One who thinks and draws conclusions from the interior natural is so far rational as he imbibes what enters through the rational. But one who thinks and draws conclusions from the exterior natural is so far sensuous as he imbibes what enters from sensuous things. Such a man is also called a sensuous man, but the other a rational natural man. When a man dies, he takes with him all the natural, and as it has been formed with him in the world, so it remains. So far as he has assimilated what is from the rational, so far he is rational, and so far as he has assimilated what is from the sensuous, so far he is sensuous. The difference is that insofar as the natural has drawn upon and appropriated what is from the rational, so far it views beneath itself the sensuous things of the exterior natural, and so far it has dominion over them, deeming worthless and rejecting the fallacies thence derived. Whereas insofar as the natural has drawn upon and appropriated the sensuous things of the body, so far it views rational things beneath itself, deeming them worthless and rejecting them. For example, the rational natural man can comprehend that man does not live from himself, but by an influx of life through heaven from the Lord. But the sensuous man cannot comprehend this, for he says that he plainly feels and perceives that life is in himself, and that it is idle to speak contrary to the evidence of the senses. As another example, the rational natural man comprehends that there is a heaven and a hell, whereas the sensuous man denies this, because he cannot conceive that there is any purer world than that which he sees with his eyes. The rational natural man comprehends that there are spirits and angels who are unseen, but the sensuous man does not comprehend this, supposing that nothing exists but what he can see and touch. Still another example. The rational natural man comprehends that it is the part of an intelligent man to consider ends, and to foresee and adjust means to some ultimate end. When he considers nature from the order of things, he sees that nature is a complex of means, and he then perceives that an intelligent supreme being has adjusted them. But to what ultimate end he does not see unless he becomes spiritual. On the other hand, the sensuous man does not understand that there can be anything distinct from nature, or consequently that there can be any entity above nature. What it is to understand to be wise, to consider ends, and to adjust means, he can only conceive if they are called natural. And when called natural, he has such an idea of these operations as a mechanic has of an automaton. From these few instances may be seen what is meant by the interior natural and the exterior natural, and also what by sensuous things being rejected, namely, the rejection not of the things of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch in the body, but of the conclusions therefrom concerning interior things. Number 5095. Of the king of Egypt. This signifies which were subordinate to the interior natural, as is evident from the representation of Pharaoh or the king of Egypt in this chapter, as being a new state of the natural. Consequently, the interior natural, for this was made new. What the interior natural is and what the exterior may be seen just above. The nature of the internal sense in the historic and prophetic portions of the word must be briefly explained. Where several persons are mentioned in the historic sense, as here Joseph, Pharaoh, the chief of the guards, the butler, and the baker, in the internal sense they indeed signify various things, but only in one person. The reason is that names signify things. For instance, Joseph here represents the Lord as to the celestial spiritual from the rational, and also in the natural. Pharaoh represents him as to the new state of the natural, or as to the interior natural. The butler and the baker represent him as to those things which are of the exterior natural. Such is the internal sense. And it is the same in other places, as where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are mentioned. In the sense of the letter, these are three persons, but in the supreme sense all three represent the Lord. Abraham, the divine itself, Isaac, the divine intellectual, and Jacob, his divine natural. It is the same in the prophets, where sometimes the narrative consists of mere names, such as those of persons, kingdoms, or cities. And yet in the internal sense, these names together represent and describe one thing. One who is not aware of this may easily be induced by the sense of the letter to think of a variety of things, and thus the idea of one thing is dissipated. Number 5096. Who were bound in the prison house. This signifies which were among falsities, as is evident from the signification of being bound in a prison house, namely, being among falsities. They who are in falsities, and still more they who are in evils, are said to be bound, and in prison, not that they wear any fetters, but because they are not in freedom, and those who are not in freedom are interiorly bound. For they who have confirmed themselves in falsity are no longer at liberty to choose and receive truth. And they who have deeply confirmed themselves therein are not even at liberty to see truth, still less to acknowledge and believe it. For they are persuaded that falsity is truth, and truth falsity. This persuasion takes away all freedom of thinking anything else, and consequently holds the very thought in bonds, and as it were in prison. This has become evident to me from much experience with those in the other life who have been in the persuasion of falsity through subjective confirmation. They are of a kind to admit no truths, but to deflect or reject them, and this with harshness according to the degree of their persuasion, especially when the falsity is from evil, or when evil has persuaded them. These are they who are meant in the Lord's parable in Matthew. Some seeds fell upon the hard way, and the birds came and devoured them. The seeds are divine truths, the hard rock is persuasion, the birds are principles of falsity. Such men do not even know that they are in bonds or in prison, for they are affected by their own falsity, and love it for the sake of the evil from which it springs. Hence they suppose that they are in freedom, for whatever is of the affection or love seems free. But they who are not in confirmed falsity, that is, in the persuasion of falsity, easily admit truths, and see and choose them, and are affected by them, and afterwards see falsities, as it were, beneath themselves, and also see how those in the persuasion of falsity are bound. These are so free that in view and thought they can, as it were, explore the whole heaven for innumerable truths. But no one can enjoy this freedom unless he is in good. For man is in heaven by virtue of good, and from this truths appear in heaven. Number 5097. And Joseph came unto them in the morning. This signifies revealed and clear to the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual, and from the signification of morning, namely a state of enlightenment, thus what is revealed and clear. Morning has this signification because all times of the day, like all times of the year, signify various states in accordance with the variations of the light of heaven. The variations of the light of heaven are not like the diurnal and annual variations of the light of the world, but are variations of intelligence and love. For the light of heaven is nothing but divine intelligence from the Lord, which is bright to the eyes, and the heat of this light is the Lord's divine love, which is warm to the sense. It is this light which gives man understanding, and this heat which gives him vital warmth and a will to good. Morning or dawn in heaven is a state of enlightenment as to the things of good and truth, which state exists when it is acknowledged, and still more when it is perceived, that good is good and that truth is truth. Perception is internal revelation. Hence the morning signifies what is revealed, and because what before was obscure then becomes clear, morning also signifies what is clear. Moreover, morning signifies in the supreme sense the Lord himself, for the Lord is the sun from which comes all the light in heaven, and he is always in the ascendant, thus in the morning. Moreover, he is always rising for everyone who receives the truth of faith and the good of love, but he is setting for everyone who does not receive these. Not that the sun there sets, for as just said, he is always in the ascendant, but he who does not receive truth and good causes him, as it were, to set for him. This may be compared in some degree to the changes of the sun of this world in respect of the inhabitants of the earth. For neither does this sun set, since it always remains in its place and is always shining thence. But it appears to set, because the earth rotates about its axis once a day, and thus removes its inhabitants from the sight of the sun. The setting, therefore, is not due to the sun, but to the removal of the inhabitants of the earth from its light. This comparison is instructive, because in every part of nature there is something representative of the Lord's kingdom. It therefore instructs us that the deprivation of the light of heaven, that is, of intelligence and wisdom, takes place not because the Lord, who is the sun of intelligence and wisdom, sets with anyone, but because the inhabitant of his kingdom removes himself, that is, suffers himself to be led away by the hell by which he is removed. Number 5098. And saw them. This signifies perception, as is evident from the signification of seeing, namely, understanding and perceiving. Number 5099. And behold, they were troubled. This signifies that they were in a sad state, as is evident without explanation. Number 5100. And he asked Pharaoh's officers. This signifies the sensuous things in question, as is evident from the signification of Pharaoh's officers, namely sensuous things of both kinds, those which are subordinate to the intellectual part and those which are subordinate to the will part. Number 5101. That were with him in the custody of his Lord's house. This signifies which were rejected, as is evident from the signification of being given into custody, thus of being in custody, namely, being in a state of rejection. Number 5102. Saying, Wherefore are your faces evil today? This signifies from what affection is this sadness, as is evident from the signification of faces, namely the interiors of the mind, thus the affections. For the interiors of man, from which come the thoughts, which are also interiors, are the affections, because as these are of his love, they are of his life. It is well known that those who are in innocence show their affections visibly in the face, and as the affections are so presented, so also are the thoughts in general, for these are the forms of the affections. Hence, regarded in itself, the face is nothing but a representative image of the mind. To the angels all faces appear thus, for the angels do not see the faces of men in their material form, but in their spiritual form, that is, in the form presented by the affections and their derivative thoughts. These are what essentially make the face of man, for when the face is deprived of them, it is evidently nothing but a dead thing. From them the face has life, and to them it owes its charm. The sadness of the affection, or from what affection is this sadness, is signified by his saying, "Wherefore are your faces evil today?" Number 5103. And they said unto him. This signifies perception concerning these things, as is evident from the signification of saying in the historic parts of the word, namely perception, of which frequently above. Number 5104. We have dreamed a dream. This signifies prediction, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely foresight, and hence prediction. Number 5105. And there is no interpreter of it. This signifies that no one knows what they involve, as is evident from the signification of an interpretation, namely an unfolding of what is involved, thus of what is within. Number 5107. Do not interpretations belong to God? This signifies that the divine is in these things, as is evident from the signification of an interpretation when predicated of dreams, namely what is in them. The divine is signified by God. Number 5108. Tell it me, I pray. This signifies that it should be known, as is evident from the signification of tell it, I pray, as involving that it be known. This is plain from the following verses. Number 5109, verses 9 to 13. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 shoots, and it was as though it were budded, its blossoms went up, and the clusters thereof ripened into grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 shoots are 3 days. Within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head, and shall restore thee to thy place. And thou shalt give Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, signifies that the celestial of the spiritual perceived the event concerning those things which were of the sensuous subject to the intellectual part, and which had hitherto been rejected. And said to him signifies revelation from perception. In my dream signifies prediction. Behold, a vine was before me, signifies the intellectual part. And in the vine were 3 shoots, signifies the derivations thence even to the last. And it was as though it budded, signifies the influx by which the rebirth is effected. Its blossom went up, signifies the state approaching regeneration. And the clusters thereof ripened into grapes, signifies conjunction of spiritual truth with celestial good. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, signifies the influx of the interior natural into the exterior, and the beginning of reception. And I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, signifies reciprocal influx into the goods from a spiritual origin there. And I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand, signifies appropriation by the interior natural. And Joseph said to him, This is the interpretation of it, signifies revelation from perception from the celestial in the natural as to what it had in itself. The 3 shoots are 3 days, signifies continuous derivations down to the last one. Within 3 days signifies that there would then be a new state. Shall Pharaoh lift up thy head, signifies what is provided, and hence what is concluded. And shall restore thee to thy place, signifies that the things of the sensuous part subject to the intellectual part would be reduced to order, that they might be in the last place. And thou shalt give Pharaoh's cup into his hand, signifies that thereby they may serve the interior natural, after the former matter, signifies in accordance with the law of order. When thou wast his butler, signifies as is usual with sensuous things of this kind. Number 5110. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph. This signifies that the celestial of the spiritual perceived the event concerning the things of the sensuous, subject to the intellectual part and which had hitherto been rejected, as is evident from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual, and from the signification of a dream, namely foresight, and hence the event, thus the event that was foreseen or perceived, and from the signification of the chief butler, namely the sensuous subject to the intellectual part in general. That it was rejected is meant by his being in custody. These things show plainly that such is the internal sense of these words. Moreover, that Joseph, by whom is represented the celestial of the spiritual, perceived the event, is evident from the verses that follow. The celestial of the spiritual means the Lord, and the same may also be said in the abstract of him, because he is the celestial itself and the spiritual itself, that is, good itself and truth itself. As regards man, these cannot indeed be conceived of in the abstract, because something natural is associated with everything of his thought. Nevertheless, when we consider that everything in the Lord is divine, and that the divine transcends all thought, and is incomprehensible even to the angels, and if we then abstract what is comprehensible, there remains being and manifestation itself, which is the celestial itself and the spiritual itself, that is, good itself and truth itself. Nevertheless, as man is such that he can have no idea whatever about abstract things unless associated with something natural that has entered from the world through the senses, for without some such natural thing his thought perishes as in an abyss and is dissipated. Therefore, lest what is divine should perish in man, when he is wholly immersed in bodily and earthly things, or should be defiled in whomsoever it remained by an unclean idea, and together with what is divine everything celestial and spiritual thence derived should also perish, it pleased Jehovah to present himself such as he actually is, and such as he appears in heaven, namely, as a divine man. For everything of heaven tends to the human form, as may be seen at the end of the chapters concerning the correspondence of all things of man with the grand man or heaven. This divine, or this of Jehovah in heaven, is the Lord from eternity. This also is what the Lord assumed when he glorified or made divine the human in himself, as is very evident from the form in which he appeared to Peter, James, and John when he was transfigured, and in which he at times appeared to the prophets. It is from this that everyone is able to think of the divine itself as of a man, and at the same time of the Lord, in whom is all the divine and a perfect Trinity. For in the Lord the divine itself is the Father, this divine in heaven is the Son, and the divine thence proceeding is the Holy Spirit. That these are a one, as he himself teaches, is hence manifest. Number 5111. And said to him. This signifies revelation from perception, as is evident from the signification of saying in the historic parts of the word, namely, perception. Thus also revelation, for this is internal perception, and is from perception. Number 5112. In my dream. This signifies prediction, as is evident from the signification of a dream, namely foresight and prediction therefrom.